Coral reefs are among the most biodiverse and productive environments on the planet. Coral reefs alone are home to over 4,000 species of fish, this richness accounting for over 20% of the total number of fish known. These numbers become even more impressive when considering that coral reefs account for only 0.2% or 1/500th of the total ocean's surface. According to some estimates, a full one-third of all marine species live on coral reefs. Because of this great richness and diversity, coral reefs are sometimes called the rainforests of the sea. Amazingly, however, this diversity thrives in ocean waters that are much more similar to deserts. Coral reefs occur in warm waters throughout the tropics. As is evident from the crystal clear visibility of many reef images, these waters are generally oligotrophic, meaning that they lack high concentrations of dissolved nutrients. Organic nutrients, including many forms of nitrogen and phosphorus, are critical building blocks to life. Much like fertilizers for land plants, nutrients serve to increase growth rates and productivity of marine species. Despite the low nutrients in tropical seawater, coral reef communities have arrived at myriad strategies for harvesting and retaining these precious few resources. The complex behaviors, adaptations, interactions, and overall diversity on reefs are precisely the characteristics that create and maintain the thriving bounty in light of the harsh challenges of the surrounding waters. Nutrients enter coral reef ecosystems mainly through three channels. The first of these sources is the arrival of plankton from the pelagic, open ocean environment. The planktonic community is composed of nutrient-rich microscopic algae and animals that are unable to swim against ocean currents. Suspended in the pelagic water, currents carry the plankton over the coral reef. Countless species of organisms, especially fish, form aggregations on reef crests to feed on these tiny organisms. Because of their tremendous efficiency at removing plankton, these aggregations of planktivorous fish are said to create a wall of mouths. Not to be left unexploited, the little plankton passing this fish wall is consumed by organisms in the benthic community, captured in large part by the tentacles of sea anemones and corals. In addition to pelagic plankton, marine waters contain even smaller suspended particles, including free dissolved organic nutrients and the heterotrophic bacteria consuming these resources. Suspended nutrients in the water column above reefs may arrive from river outflows, from nearby land, or from occasional deep seawater upwelling. Despite the low concentration of suspended nutrients in tropical waters, filter-feeding organisms such as sponges, clams, and polychaete tube worms extract these particles. The third important input of nutrients to coral reefs arrives in the guts of highly mobile animals. Many so-called trophic migrants use coral reefs as home and shelter, despite using adjacent habitats for foraging. For example, green sea turtles and manatees frequently spend their daylight hours foraging in seagrass beds and mangroves, returning at nights to coral reefs for shelter. During the night, the food consumed during the day is digested and the waste is excreted on the reef. Because digestion by large animals is fairly inefficient, the algae, corals, and filter-feeding organisms are able to acquire the waste of these large animals, extracting the remaining nutrients from their urine and feces. Through varied mechanisms, the biota of reefs are not only very efficient at obtaining new nutrients, but also at retaining and recycling these nutrients, thus minimizing the rate of loss from the ecosystem. For example, many turf algae are helped around nutrient limitation through passive associations with animals. These algae tend to grow on the same substrate that form the shelter for many fish. As fish take refuge from predators during the day, or find sleeping shelter at night, they release urine and feces directly onto the algal surfaces. The waste of the fish becomes the bounty of the algae, and this increase of local nutrient concentration through fish excretion directly fertilizes the algal productivity. Completing the cycle of biotic retention, these productive turfs are consumed rapidly by the very fish community that fertilized its growth. The tight linkages between organisms on coral reefs are not limited to animals associated with plants, but between organisms at all taxonomic and functional levels. For example, fish feces not only are used as algal fertilizer, but perhaps more frequently are directly consumed by other fish. In one study on Caribbean reefs, it was estimated that a particle of food eaten by one fish passes through an average of 6 other fish before being passed on to the benthic community. This mechanism of eating feces is ubiquitous on reefs and includes fish at all trophic levels. The trophic roles of the many reef invertebrates are much more poorly understood, yet certainly parallel or exceed these dynamic efficiencies of the more easily studied fish and algal communities. In light of the dramatic impacts of human activities on coral reefs, however, many of these trophic dynamics, especially the incredible efficiencies, are being lost. Fishing activities tend to target larger animals, reducing the average size of fish on reefs. Allometric scaling relationships show that smaller fish are less efficient than larger fish. In other words, big fish are better at converting food into new biomass, while smaller fish lose more of this food to respiration and other trophic inefficiencies. Human disturbances on reefs also change the food web structure, frequently reducing the functional diversity of the community. With reduced diversity, recycling mechanisms are weakened and nutrients are lost more quickly from the system. Finally, human impacts tend to microbialize reef communities, shifting functional dominance from large plants and animals to much smaller bacteria. With overfishing, the role of fish in cleaning dead material and feces from the reef is reduced, leaving this material available for bacterial growth. Similarly, with increased nutrient loading of reefs by human activities, as by coastal runoff of fertilizers and human waste, the bacterial community becomes fertilized directly by these dissolved nutrients and indirectly through inefficient production of algae. Bacteria may be viewed as efficient in some ways, in particular their capacity to grow quickly in response to fluctuating resource availability. However, this fast growth is paralleled by rapid respiration, death, and trophic loss. In comparison to the trophic role of plants and animals, microbes are a form of biological entropy, turning fixed energy and nutrients into dissolved or inorganic forms rapidly. These particles are then lost from the ecosystem. Any visitor to a coral reef will be struck by the many and varied interaction among species. A host of feeding mechanisms maintains tight community structure and efficiency, supporting a dynamic trophic oasis in the desert of the tropical seas. As human impacts reach coral reef environments, many of these trophic dynamics and efficiencies are lost. Our goal now should be to learn from the efficiency of reefs and, within our own human culture, to find social and political strategies that parallel the elegant interactions among reef species. In order to protect natural habitats for the long term, we must identify ways that humans can live with, and not instead of, wonderful natural environments like coral reefs.